And welcome to Around the Ozarks Spotlight. Each week we uncover the stories behind the people who live and work here in Southwest Missouri. Those individuals with entrepreneurial spirit who work to better the lives of others, or even put pen to paper to write books about stories and history of the Ozarks and its people. I'm your host, Scott Meier, and today we're going to explore the world of the Dickerson Park Zoo, where we haven't explored in some time, with Park Director Mike Crocker. Hello, Mike.
Hello.
And how are you? How are
I'm
things?
good.
How's the zoo? What's going on at the zoo?
Zoo's busy. We've had good weather mostly in the last couple of weeks, so we're busy every day.
Now, Michael, before we get too far into what the zoo is up to, let's talk about you a little bit. Who is Mike Crocker? Where are you from?
Well, I'm a Springfield native. I went to Glendale High School, graduated from Missouri State University, 1971, with a degree in wildlife management and conservation and a minor in military science.
Oh, really? So you either could have been a cop or a zookeeper, or maybe it's one and the same. I'm not sure these days, right?
Yeah.
Have a family?
Yeah, my wife and I have 3 children, 6 grandchildren, and 1 great grandchild.
Oh, congratulations!
Thank you.
A great grandchild. Well, I'm not quite there yet, but that's exciting. And you've been in your role at Dickerson Park Zoo for some time.
Yes, I'm getting close to 47 years.
47 years. That just doesn't happen anymore.
I know it's rather unusual, but I've enjoyed the time here.
So let's go back to your education. So you were majoring or minoring in, was it political science? What'd you say?
Military science.
Military science.
Yeah.
And which I assume meant you had some idea about maybe joining the military. Is that fair?
Well, when I was in college, Army ROTC was required at Missouri State.
Okay.
It wasn't called Missouri State back then, but it was required for 2 full years, and this was during the Vietnam War.
Mm-hmm.
And so all of the male students were being drafted as soon as they graduated. So I decided to stay in for 2 more years and go in as an officer. So that's how that worked.
So you did go in the military then?
I did. I spent 2 years on active duty as a communications officer, and actually spent most of my time at Fort Leonard Wood.
Yeah, well, that was fortunate. I graduated college in 76, but high school in 72, and they were picking off kids in my class, the ones that had the really low number when we had the lottery.
Yeah.
I tried to get into officer training school at Marquette. I wanted to go into the Navy. I wasn't interested in tromping around in a rice paddy, and couldn't get in. I mean, it was everybody that was my age was busy trying to do that, so they wouldn't get drafted.
Sure.
And always thought I'd like to do that, but I kind of wish I had done the military thing. Did you come away with things that have helped you in life?
Oh yeah, I tell people all the time. Even though I decided I didn't want to make a career out of it. It was a life-changing thing for me. I learned a lot from those 2 years that ultimately benefited me in my career, I think.
Was your family a military family? So many here are in Southwest Missouri.
Not really. My father was in the Marines shortly after World War II, and he was in, I think, for 11 months.
Oh, really?
So that's it. None of my brothers went in the military. Nobody before me other than my dad that short time. None of my close friends or none of my family's friends went in the military at that time.
So when you graduated and went into officers training, that was Army, Fort Leonard Wood? So how'd that go with Dad? I mean, he's a Marine. It's got to be.
It was fine. I mean, my equivalent to basic training happened between my junior and senior years at college. We got sent to Fort Riley, Kansas for 6 weeks and had training out there. And then when I actually went on active duty for my chosen field, communications, that was 10 weeks. And then I was sent to Fort Leonard Wood after those 10 weeks.
Well, congratulations on not having to go necessarily in the field of battle, even though you were always on call. So thank you for your service. We appreciate that. At a moment's notice, you could have been over there, right?
Right.
Yeah. People forget that. They think just because you were stateside, at any given moment, they can put you on an airplane or a ship and send you over to somewhere. So the Dickerson Park Zoo thing started right after that, right after your military service?
Yeah, after I got off active duty in January of 74, I ended up going to work at a rock quarry for a couple of years out south of town on Highway 65.
Mm-hmm.
And that really, I didn't have any career doing what I was doing there. And I got to looking at the zoo. I looked at the zoo quite some time earlier, and it wasn't really looking good. The pay was really bad. The zoo was really run down, but things were starting to change after they hired a new director in January of 1975. So I applied to be a zookeeper, and I was originally hired in July of 76 to be a reptile keeper. And I thought, how great can that be? My hobby growing up was reptiles. I was
Okay.
obsessed with reptiles, especially snakes. And
Oh my
most
God.
of my family and friends going back to childhood still call me Snake. That's been my nickname most of my life. So that's really what led me into the zoo career. Started as a reptile keeper and then just moved into other positions from there. Never really had a goal to be a zoo director. It just kind of happened that way.
Well, I think that happens in a lot of careers, doesn't it? You may have your sights set at some point of something, but you're not really sure what. And how old were you at the time?
26, maybe
Yeah.
27. Uh-huh.
So you were in heaven. You had a full-time job at a zoo. Now, Springfield, we've only lived here about 8 years. So
Uh-huh.
you go back to your time at Glendale and then in college. The city of Springfield itself was what, maybe 120,000 people then?
Sounds about right.
Okay, how could they afford a zoo? A lot of communities that size don't have zoos. How did Springfield
They
have a zoo?
don't. And back then, they weren't putting very much money into the zoo. The zoo had really run down over the years. It started in 1923. This is our 100th anniversary this year.
Is that congratulations?
Yeah. And so that's a big deal for us this year. They
Sure.
really hadn't put a lot of money into the zoo back then, really didn't start putting more money in it till probably the mid 90s to the early 2000s is when
Hmm.
it really changed dramatically. But the zoo was pretty primitive when I started here in 1976, and there's not much of the old zoo left anymore. It's changed, it's modernized. We've been accredited by the Association of Zoos and Aquariums since
Hmm.
1986, which says that we're operating at the highest level of professionalism, taking care of the animals and all that. In fact, not only is this year our 100th anniversary of the zoo, it's also when we have to go through reaccreditation, which is every 5 years. So
Hmm.
that'll be happening in June.
My guest you're hearing and viewing, if you're watching the podcast, is Dickerson Park Zoo park director Mike Crocker. 47 years, you said? 46
Pretty
years?
close, yeah.
Almost so soon be 47 years,
Yeah.
which is amazing. How long is a park zoo director? As
Uh,
being the main guy
since 1988.
since 1988. Now, who did you take over for, and what did you learn from him or her?
I took over from Dale Tuttle. He left in the spring of 1988 to take a job at another zoo. So, I learned quite a bit from him while I was here. I mean, I started as a reptile keeper. I knew the world of reptiles really well, but I really didn't know a whole lot about other animals. On those first couple of years were a real learning experience. I found out real quickly the capabilities of some of those things. We had a
Sure.
male baboon escape one day that year.
Escaped.
And he attacked the previous zoo director. And that really opened my eyes up to what some of these animals are capable of doing.
How did you catch him?
Well, there were four of us that went to check the situation out. We got a report that the baboon was out, and male baboons are pretty dangerous and pretty fierce. And next thing I know, I mean, he turned and came on at a full gallop and jumped through the air about 5 feet off the ground. And the zoo director threw up his arm, and he chomped on him several times real fast. Those big canine teeth of his, they just went right through his leather gloves like razor blades and sliced him up pretty bad.
Oh my goodness! So he never left the park.
No,
he was still in the park.
Threw him to the ground, and one of the group of three, I was kind of off in a different area by myself. The other three were together, and one of them threw a net over him real quick and got him cinched up in the net and got him back in the building where he came from before he could chew his way out of the net.
Is that the only time there's been an escape?
Oh, no, I've experienced a lot of them over that period of time.
How about the reptiles? Are they tougher or easier than the baboons to keep where they're supposed to be?
Well, Hard question to answer. Snakes themselves are escape artists. So if you don't pay attention and there's a little hole you don't see, they're going to find it. They're capable of going through pretty small spaces and getting out of things.
Sure.
But we have much better training today, much better facilities than we had back then, much better protocols for safety and security. So escapes don't happen real often, but they are a fact of life in zoos.
But what a point of learning to have this animal.
Yeah.
I mean, people forget sometimes wild animals are called wild animals for a reason.
That's right. They still
they're not domesticated.
Nope, they're not. They may look like they are sometimes because have a good disposition, well trained, but they still have those same capabilities that they have in the wild.
Now, I like to ask questions that can be tough answers. I'm not trying to put you in a corner, but I'm sure the world today is very different than it was 20 years ago or 40 years ago, 60 years ago. In the world of being a zookeeper or someone who's, like in your case, being the director of a zoo, do you get pushback from the community at all about a zoo, or can you lay maybe the groundwork of why zoos are important and why it's a good thing and not a bad thing? Everybody today has a voice, right?
Yeah, I think how much pushback you get more than anything depends on what part of the country you live in.
Mm-hmm.
We don't get a lot of that here, but zoos have changed a lot over time. Our core mission is saving animals.
Mm-hmm.
Saving animals from extinction. So that's what the zoo's all about. And the way we do that is by having a nice zoo. People come out either as a school outing or more often a family recreational experience and learn something about the animals while they're here.
Mm-hmm.
And the money that we make from what we do day to day helps support or provide the ability to financially support field conservation programs.
Let's talk about financing for a little bit. Where does the money come from?
Well, we are a division of the Parks Department.
Mm-hmm.
The Parks Department has 3 dedicated funding sources. They have a property tax levy that's been around since the early 1900s. Then there's a countywide sales tax for parks that was passed in 2001 and another one in 2006. Then on top of those, you have fees and charges for various programs. The zoo has an admission charge. Then people pay for purchasing food and drink when they're in the zoo, or riding the train, or feeding the giraffe, or buying an annual pass, a membership, or whatever. So a combination of all those things is what it takes to operate the zoo. The zoo's operated as part of the Parks Department, but Friends of the Zoo, our nonprofit support organization, actually operates all the revenue producing activities on a daily basis under contract with parks. So about 55% of our total annual operating budget is on the park side of our operation, and about 45% of the budget is on the Friends of the Zoo side. So those two collectively is what it takes to run the zoo every year, and currently that's about $5.4 million.
Well, hold that thought. When we come back from the break, we'll talk a little bit more about financing. But I want to get into some of the things that are happening and going to happen at the zoo this year, so we can see if we can get some more families to come out and help with that admission fee. You're listening to Around the Ozarks Spotlight, and my guest, Dickerson Park Zoo Park Director Mike Crocker. And we'll have more with Mike in just a moment. I'm your host, Scott Meier, and we'll be back right after these messages.
Hey, everybody, it's Ethan and Sarah Forhetz from your favorite podcast, Around the Ozarks in 5. I'm sure you've been wondering, how can I get even more amazing stories, events, and witty banter to start my day?
Well, look no further. Here we are. Sign up for our daily newsletter. You'll have what's going on around the Ozarks right at your fingertips each weekday morning.
Yeah, just go to AroundTheOzarks.com, click on the newsletter tab to sign up.
Thanks for listening to Around the Ozarks in 5. We hope to see you in your inbox soon.
Welcome back to Around the Ozarks Spotlight. Today, my guest is Mike Crocker. Mike is the park director for the Dickerson Park Zoo. Mike, we were talking about finances a minute ago. Let's take one step back. Where did the name Dickerson Park come from?
Well, the property where the zoo is located was purchased from the estate of Jerome Dickerson in 1922. And that original tract of land includes where the zoo is now. It also includes the fairgrounds. The fairgrounds property was part of that purchase, and then it's leased to the fairgrounds now by the city of Springfield.
Mm-hmm. Now,
we've
go
added
ahead.
a little bit to the zoo property since then, and then we also gave up one small piece to city utilities for an electric substation.
Ah, okay. Now, we were talking a minute ago, bless you. We were talking a minute ago about financing and the importance of the financing. Is there enough money?
Never enough money.
Okay. How was that for a
Never enough
softball?
money.
Never enough money. But you said there's been a lot of activity really since the mid-2000s in terms of updating and creating better spaces. So it appears the funding has gotten better, or is it just you're spending it smarter, or what's happening?
It got better, but the costs of doing business are going up all the time, especially in the last couple of years. Cost of labor has skyrocketed, and the cost of supplies and materials from utilities to animal food or whatever has grown dramatically. So it's been a challenge to keep up with that.
What I would assume park directors like yourself talk to each other all the time. Are there some things financially that they're doing in other cities that maybe, especially cities our size, that maybe we could institute to help you out a little bit?
Oh, I think we all pretty much do the same kinds of things. Every zoo is unique in how it's governed and how it's funded. But overall, we're doing the same kinds of things. You pay to get in the zoo in most cases, and then it's a combination of spending as a guest while you're in the zoo. So it's pretty similar to what other zoos are doing.
Now you have season passes for families?
Season passes through Friends of the Zoo, yes.
And how does that work?
Well, they purchase a membership depending on what level, everything from an individual plus a guest to what you would otherwise call a family or a grandparent pass, and then 2 or 3 premium levels where you give more on top of your basic membership with those benefits. And it's good for a year from the time you purchase it. They're also honored at, I don't know what the number is, other zoos and aquariums around the country at different levels of that.
Well, but the good news is they're probably not getting fewer as the city grows in terms of the numbers of buying families buying these passes, I would hope.
No, actually, the highest level of growth that we've ever seen in our memberships happened about 2 years ago. After COVID, we rapidly grew from around 4,000 memberships roughly to a little over 6,000 in a very brief period of time. Last 12 months or so, it's been dropping off. I didn't really expect it to stay at that 6,000 level, but we dropped significantly last year. I think it's on the upward swing again, or at least I'm hoping it is.
Well, I think, and one of the reasons we do a program like this is to draw more attention. I'm a grandparent myself, and whenever our grandkids visit this community, the first place we take them is Dickerson Park Zoo.
Oh, good. I'm glad to hear that.
Well, the neat thing about a zoo, and again, in a city this size, we're really blessed to have a zoo, especially the zoo we have. I've been in a lot of places in my career. I've seen the San Diego Zoo. I've seen the Bronx Zoo. Been to the Toledo Zoo. Now Toledo's a much bigger community, and that zoo is amazing. I mean, it's for Toledo, it's like one of their primary go-to places. But when you compare many of them just to the Dickerson Park Zoo, it's still a pretty nice place.
Yeah, most communities the size of Springfield don't have zoos because they are so expensive to build and so expensive to operate. So for the size that Springfield is, we really have a lot of zoo for the size of the communities to support it.
Now, I know your business can be very competitive. How have we been able to keep Mike Crocker here in Springfield this long?
Well, I have never had any desire to go anyplace else. I mean, all of my family is here, all of my close friends. I have very strong ties to the community, so
Mhm.
I've never been tempted to try to go anywhere else.
I got to believe you get a few calls, or used to anyway.
At my age, I don't get those calls anymore.
No, I'm not going there. But back in the day, I mean, as cities began to proliferate and grow, they had zoos, and a lot of them. I know from my past experience working with different zoos around the country, there's pressure on finding people that do what you do or know what you know, and can do it.
Yeah, there's probably a lot more competition now for that. A lot of my contemporaries, the people I've known for decades, they've retired or in the process of retiring over the last couple of years. So a lot more younger people that I don't really know in the field yet. So there's always competition to get those experienced people to lead those institutions.
Let me ask you, if you had a chance to improve, update, or add 5 different things, what might they look like?
I would renovate Dickerson Lake, which is the larger of the 2 bodies of water in the zoo, because it needs it. I would add more paved parking area for guests, because there's always a shortage of that between us and the fairgrounds events. There's oftentimes a shortage of places to park.
Sure.
Um,
How about on the animals front? Any animals that you'd like to add?
Well, there are 2 exhibits that we have in the long range plans to add. They would be in the Asian themed area of the zoo. One's a small mammal exhibit. The one that we would most like to add is a red panda.
Really?
They're about the size of raccoons, and they're kind of reddish colored. They're really neat animals. The second one would be a Komodo dragon, very popular, especially with young boys.
Sure, and a reptile.
And
right?
a reptile, my favorite thing. And
Right
the
up
other
your
one that's
right up your
probably
league there.
at the top of the list of my animal care staff that they want really bad is rhinos.
Really?
Yes.
That's got to be a lot to take care of, I would think. They must have a fairly large area that they need for a sanctuary.
They're a fairly expansive area, but they're actually a lot easier to take care of than things like elephants and hippos. We still have elephants. We haven't had hippos for a couple of years now. And
I think I was one of the last to get to feed Harry. That was
Henry, yeah,
Henry rather. I'm sorry, Henry. Just before he left.
Gone for quite a few years, and he passed away a few years ago at Cincinnati. And then we held a couple.
But he was a father, wasn't he?
Yeah.
He was a father before he
Father
passed
to
away.
Fiona, world famous Fiona. Then we had a couple of female hippos from Cheyenne Mountain Zoo in Colorado Springs. We kept for them for 2 or 3 years while they built a new hippo exhibit. But they went back well over a year ago.
Now, how do you get a rhino? How do you get a hippo? What's the process that you have to go through to be able to grab an animal like that and bring them to a place like Springfield? There must be steps that you have to go through.
Yeah, most of the animals that zoos have are coming from other zoos. A lot of them have been born in zoos. And so as far as actually getting them here physically, with a rhino, most likely would be transported inside a modified moving van, or maybe a steel crate on top of a flatbed trailer. When we moved Henry, that's how he was moved. He was in a big steel crate that was fastened down to a flatbed truck. And we bring in a large crane to lift that crate off the truck or to put it on the truck. And when we sent those 2 hippos back to Colorado, that's exactly what we did. We had to condition them to enter the crates, and shut the door. Then we had a big crane that lifted them about 30 to 40 feet up in the air and swung them around over the trees, and then set them down on top of that big flatbed trailer, and then strapped them down and then transported them. And of course, you got to do that when the weather's pretty good.
Yeah. Now, Mike, I can't imagine, not unlike a family farm, some of these animals, you grow attached to them, and or maybe you don't. But somebody like Henry, he was at the zoo how many years?
Henry came here in, I think it was around 1982. Another keeper and I actually drove out to San Francisco and picked him up. I think he was about 9 months old at that time. So he was in his early to mid 30s when he left here.
Wow.
And yeah, Henry was probably, of all the animals we've had, the most favorite of guests and the favorite of our animal care staff.
And it's
Everybody
interesting.
loved Henry.
You know, hippos, you read stories about hippos, about the fact that in the wild they can be, I guess, as dangerous as anything out there. But Henry just seemed like one of the guys.
Yeah,
He just
Henry,
seemed he loved to eat. It was fun to watch him eat.
we don't go in with them because they're potentially too dangerous. But Henry had a good personality, you know,
Yeah.
and he was just a neat hippo. And I wouldn't know how to explain it other than that, but everybody loved Henry.
Now, do you grow attached to some of the animals in the
Sure.
zoo, or do you like
Yeah.
who, for instance? Who's your favorite?
Well, the one that I probably, other than my favorite being reptiles, but you don't get really close to them like you do some
No.
other animals. But my favorite was a male spider monkey named Bozo that we had here. And he had so much personality. Sometimes it was bad.
Mhm.
Sometimes it was great. If he really liked to see a day, he was chirping and making, vocalizing all kinds, trying to get you to come up and interact with him through the wire. But he passed away about a year ago. He was 50-some years old.
Really? They
Yeah.
lived that long?
Yep. He was
Wow.
pretty old.
That had to be tough. Did we have a some kind of a service? Was there something?
No, not really.
No.
And we
What
have
happens to
a
an
new
animal?
a new male spider monkey now. And
Yeah.
he's a very attractive animal. He's got a lot of white markings on him. So I hated to see Bozo go because he had so much personality.
They come and they go. You're
Yeah.
hearing my guest today, Mike Crocker. Mike is the park director for the Dickerson Park Zoo, and I want to take a moment to thank him for coming on. I appreciate that, Mike. It's one of those places you go to the Ozark Fairgrounds. You know the zoo's there. You drive by it on 65 Highway. You see the exit, but maybe you don't get there often enough. The zoo's open year round, is it not?
Yeah, the only time that we're closed is on Thanksgiving, Christmas, and New Year's. And then if we got real bad weather in the wintertime where we get a lot of ice and snow on the sidewalks, we're closed then.
Now, this is the 100th anniversary. What do you got planned?
Well, we've got all kinds of specials we're doing for members each month, something different. Then we have our main party will be on Saturday, July the 15th. I don't think my marketing people have all the details of everything worked out yet. So
Right.
they kind of come up with these ideas and develop them as time goes on.
Well, it's an exciting time, and I know you've introduced things like craft beers, right? Having craft beers found their way to the zoo.
Yeah, that's one of our two primary fundraising events. Brew at the Zoo is what you're referring to, and that'll be
Right.
in September.
And those are popular. They do those all around the country, and it's amazing. The Detroit Zoo, where some of my kids live and attend, that's a sold out event. I mean, they
Yeah.
actually have people coming in different times of the day, and if you don't make your window, tough, you don't get in.
Yeah,
So they go well, and it seems to work well with the zoo.
yep. They're a good fit for zoos. Most of them are after hours events. Ours is.
Sure, but you're still there, and you still get a chance to get to see the animals
Yes.
and enjoy yourself. Now, one last question, only because only you could answer this. As a guy who likes reptiles, snakes, and spiders, and all that stuff, how'd you meet your wife? Was it at the zoo or was it someplace else?
No, actually, it was out one night with a couple of friends and going around to bars and things like that, and that's how we met.
And you told her,
And I don't understand it to this day. She knew immediately that she was going to marry me.
oh, is that right?
That's a concept I can't even begin to understand, but she says, "Yep, I knew it."
Was that before or after she knew you like spiders and snakes and reptiles?
I would say that was before she found out about my snake collection.
Oh, that's great. We've only got a few seconds left. Anything else you want to add? If somebody wants to help give the zoo some funds, or if they want a season's pass for themselves or gifting somebody, what's the best way to do that?
Well, they can call the office here and buy them that way. They can go to the zoo's website, dickersonparkzoo.org. They can buy them through the website. We find that most people buy their memberships at the admission gate. And so when they are set to expire, they tend to wait and buy their new one the next
Mhm.
time they come to the zoo. Most people buy them for the economic benefit because you can come as often as you like.
Well, Mike, I appreciate you guesting today, and
Thank you.
I hope you'll come back. Congrats on the 100th anniversary, and congrats on all the reptiles. I think that's wonderful.
Thank you
I
very
want to
much.
thank my guest, Mike Crocker, today on Around the Ozark Spotlight. Also, my producer, Taylor Worley, and also Jay Stevens, as well as all of you for joining us today. If you happen to miss all or part of today's program, you can find it in its entirety on MidwestFamilySpringfield.com website, the AroundTheOzarks.com site, or a new app for ATO, which can be found in Apple apps or Android apps. Also on our Facebook page for Midwest Family Radio. You can hear and view today's show as well as all of the earlier shows this year and last on all of those places. I'm Scott Meier, and remember that every day is a gift. Enjoy life. Thanks again, Mike.
Thank you.